You thought you could blindside us with half-truths, Congresswoman? Vice President J.D. Vance's voice, usually a calm baritone, cut through the tense hearing room like a scalpel, each word precisely aimed. But what you've presented today isn't oversight. It's an economic demolition derby, and the American people are your crash test dummies. The air crackled, and across the table, Representative Jasmine Crockett's confident smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine surprise as the full weight of his counterattack began to land. The morning sky over Washington, D.C. hung low and gray, mirroring the mood within the hallowed halls of Congress. A legislative storm had been brewing for weeks, centered on a critical budget bill designed to supercharge the nation's economic growth and rebuild decaying infrastructure. For President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance, this bill wasn't just policy. It was a promise, a cornerstone of their vision for a revitalized America. But standing squarely in their path, a formidable and increasingly vocal antagonist, was Representative Jasmine Crockett. From the moment the budget was introduced, Crockett had taken to the committee hearings like a seasoned prosecutor, but one seemingly more interested in theatrical performance than due diligence. She was sharp, quick-witted, and possessed an uncanny ability to distill complex issues into punchy, soundbite-ready criticisms. Her target, the administration's proposed spending, which she relentlessly painted as fiscally irresponsible, a blank check to corporations, and detrimental to the common citizen. Her amendments, crafted with insidious precision, weren't designed to improve the bill. They were engineered to cripple it, to strip away its core initiatives, leaving it a hollow shell. This budget, Crockett had declared in a previous session, her voice dripping with scorn, is a fantasy novel penned by economic illiterates. It promises bridges to nowhere and jobs that don't exist, all while emptying the pockets of hard-working Americans. She leaned into the cameras, her eyes narrowed, as if delivering a verdict directly to the living rooms of the nation. A segment of the opposition, eager for a champion, had begun to rally around her, amplifying her every accusation. Back at the White House, the strategists were fuming. "She's playing a dangerous game," an aide muttered during a briefing, pointing to polling numbers that showed a slight dip in public confidence regarding the budget. President Trump, however, had merely leaned back in his chair, a familiar glint in his eye. "Dangerous games are my favorite kind, but she's got fire, I'll give her that. We need to fight fire with a cannon, not a garden hose." J.D. Vance, ever the stoic and analytical counterpart, had been quietly compiling data, cross-referencing Crockett's claims with economic models, infrastructure project data, and job growth projections. He knew her tactics: hit hard, hit fast, and confuse with complexity. But he also knew the truth, and the truth, he believed, was an unassailable weapon. The day of the pivotal oversight hearing arrived with a palpable sense of anticipation. The committee room was packed, not just with lawmakers and their staff, but with journalists, camera crews, and an unusually large public gallery. This wasn't just a legislative session. It was a gladiatorial arena. Crockett swept in, her head held high, acknowledging the murmurs and flashes of cameras with a confident, almost triumphant smile. She took her seat at the witness table, a stack of meticulously organized notes before her, each page presumably filled with traps and rhetorical landmines. Her opening statement was a masterclass in carefully worded condemnation, painting a bleak picture of the nation's economic future under the proposed budget. She concluded by reiterating her conviction that the administration was out of touch, out of ideas, and out of time. The initial round of questioning saw Crockett launch into high-ranking administration officials. She was relentless, firing off questions about budget line items, projected deficits, and the granular details of proposed infrastructure projects. She cut off answers she deemed too long or evasive, her voice rising in indignation. "Secretary Thompson," she pressed, leaning into the microphone, "can you honestly tell this committee that committing billions to a high-speed rail initiative that bypasses half our major industrial centers isn't a direct subsidy to corporate cronies, rather than a genuine benefit to the American commuter?" Secretary Thompson, a seasoned bureaucrat, stammered, attempting to explain the long-term economic benefits and job creation, but Crockett cut him off. "A simple yes or no, Secretary. Are you prioritizing corporate profits over public good?" She knew a simple answer wasn't possible, and the optics of his struggle played directly into her narrative. She did this again and again, leaving a trail of frustrated officials and a rising sense of unease in the room. The tension climbed with each exchange. Crockett seemed to be everywhere at once, her voice sharp, her questions designed to box in the witnesses. She produced charts and graphs, seemingly pulled from obscure reports, to support her claims, daring anyone to challenge their veracity. She played to the cameras, her expressions shifting from concerned citizen to righteous indignation, a performer at the peak of her craft. The murmurs in the gallery grew louder, some nodding in agreement with her every point, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Just as the momentum seemed entirely on Crockett's side, a ripple went through the room. The doors at the back opened, and Vice President J.D. Vance entered, his presence immediately commanding attention. He walked with a quiet, purposeful stride, his gaze scanning the room, acknowledging a few nods from committee members, but his focus quickly settling on the proceedings. There was no grand entrance, no fanfare, just a composed man ready for business. Crockett, mid-sentence, paused, a slight frown creasing her brow. She hadn't expected him to testify, or at least not so early. Vance took his seat at the witness table, directly facing Crockett. He adjusted the microphone, a quiet confidence emanating from him that contrasted sharply with Crockett's more flamboyant style. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," Vance began, his voice clear and resonant. "I understand there have been some spirited discussions regarding the proposed budget. I've been listening intently, and while the passion for our nation's economic well-being is commendable, I believe a deeper, more factual analysis is required." He looked directly at Crockett. "Congresswoman Crockett, you've painted a picture of fiscal recklessness. You've introduced amendments that, while perhaps well-intentioned, are frankly economically disastrous. Let's talk specifics." The atmosphere in the room shifted. This wasn't a cabinet secretary. This was the vice president, renowned for his sharp intellect and a willingness to engage directly. Crockett recovered quickly. "Mr. Vice President, I simply asked for accountability. This administration's plans are opaque, and their promises are as empty as their proposed jobs figures." She gestured dismissively at the budget document. "For instance, your infrastructure plan allocates a significant portion to what you call future technologies. Could you explain to the American people why we are funding speculative ventures when our roads are crumbling and our bridges are unsafe?" Her tone was dismissive, trying to frame his response as an admission of fantastical spending. Vance nodded slowly, a slight, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. An excellent question, Congresswoman, and one that demonstrates precisely where your analysis, or perhaps your intent, diverges from reality." He paused for effect. "You see speculative ventures. We see innovation. Let's take the quote, rail you just disparaged. Your amendment would gut its funding entirely. What you fail to mention, or perhaps understand, is that this initiative isn't just about building tracks. It's about leveraging cutting-edge material science, AI-driven logistics, and green energy solutions. These are the quote, technologies you deride. We project this single initiative will directly create over 500,000 jobs in manufacturing, engineering, and construction. Jobs that are high-paying, skilled, and cannot be outsourced." He leaned forward, his voice gaining intensity. "Furthermore, the economic impact extends far beyond the construction phase. Imagine connecting our major industrial hubs with unparalleled speed and efficiency. This slashes supply chain costs, reduces carbon emissions, and makes American goods more competitive globally. Your amendment, Congresswoman, would not only sacrifice these future gains, but would actively stifle innovation and leave us technologically behind our competitors." Crockett scoffed. "Empty promises. We've heard this before. Where are your detailed projections? Where is the ironclad guarantee these jobs will materialize? These are just numbers on a page." Vance remained unruffled. "I'm glad you asked about numbers on a page, Congresswoman, because unlike your selective figures, ours are grounded in verifiable data." He signaled to an aide, and large screens in the committee room flickered to life, displaying complex but clear graphs and charts. "This," Vance stated, pointing to a graph showing projected job growth tied to specific technological advancements. is from the Congressional Budget Office's own independent analysis of infrastructure spending patterns over the last 3 decades, adjusted for technological shifts. This, he clicked to a new slide showing global market trends, is a comparison of current rail speeds and freight costs in the U.S. versus our major economic rivals. Your amendment, by cutting critical funding, would ensure we remain at a significant disadvantage, hindering our ability to compete in the 21st century. He continued, dissecting each of Crockett's previous points with precision. When she argued that tax cuts for businesses were a handout, Vance presented data on small business reinvestment and subsequent local job creation. When she claimed the budget neglected social programs, he highlighted targeted allocations for vocational training and community development, showing how they were integrated within the larger economic framework to provide sustainable pathways out of poverty, rather than merely temporary relief. You speak of fiscal responsibility, Congresswoman, Vance said, his voice now lower, more serious. But your amendments are fiscally negligent. They propose dismantling a comprehensive plan for growth and replacing it with a patchwork of cuts that would not only stall our economic momentum, but actively create new burdens. For example, your proposal to defund the Rural Connectivity Initiative, what you dismiss as unnecessary broadband expansion, would isolate millions of Americans in rural areas, denying them access to telemedicine, online education, and vital economic opportunities. Is that responsible for your constituents, or is it a strategic surrender to the very digital divide we are working to close? Crockett's face, which had been contorting in a mixture of disbelief and growing fury, finally cracked. This is absurd! You're twisting facts! You're talking about future technologies when people can't even afford gas today. This is a smokescreen. She pounded the table, her voice shrill. The American people aren't fools. They know a scam when they see one. The American people, Vance responded, his voice unwavering, also recognize a carefully constructed narrative designed to divide them and undermine progress. My testimony and the data I've presented isn't about scams, Congresswoman. It's about strategic investment. It's about building a foundation for sustainable prosperity. And it's about making tough, forward-looking decisions that ensure America remains a global leader, not a nation constantly playing catch-up. At that precise moment, a notification buzzed across the phones of every journalist and many committee members. A powerful, unequivocal statement had just been released from the Oval Office. President Trump, seizing the moment, had issued his own full-throated endorsement. Vice President Vance's masterful presentation today lays bare the truth, the statement read. The proposed budget is not just fiscally sound. It is the blueprint for America's next great era. Those who seek to dismantle it with baseless accusations are not fighting for the American people. They are fighting against progress itself. We will not allow the voices of division to derail our nation's future. This budget is essential, and we will deliver. The statement, perfectly timed, added an undeniable weight to Vance's testimony. It was a clear signal. The administration was united, resolute, and armed with facts. Crockett, caught between Vance's dismantling of her arguments and Trump's public endorsement, looked cornered. She tried to interrupt Vance again, but the chairman, sensing the shift in momentum, firmly gave Vance the floor. Vance concluded, his voice calm and authoritative. The choice before this committee, and indeed before the American people, is clear. Do we succumb to the politics of obstruction and fear? Or do we embrace a future built on sound economic principles, strategic investment, and unyielding optimism? Our budget is designed for the latter. It is designed to empower every American, strengthen every community, and secure our nation's prosperity for generations to come. The gavel fell, signaling the end of the hearing. Crockett, her face flushed, gathered her papers, avoiding eye contact with Vance. Her theatrical accusations, once so potent, now seemed hollow, exposed as mere political posturing. The narrative had flipped. The committee, having witnessed the meticulous breakdown of her claims, moved forward with the budget bill, its core initiatives intact. The following days saw the bill pass with broader support than anticipated, a clear testament to Vance's compelling testimony and Trump's strategic backing. Crockett's attempt to obstruct had not only failed but had inadvertently highlighted the pragmatic and effective leadership of Trump and Vance. In the heated exchange between Vice President Vance and Representative Crockett, Which moment or specific argument do you think was the most critical in turning the tide of the debate? Share your thoughts below. And if you want more stories about moments where truth and strategy triumph over political theatrics, make sure to subscribe.